What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Haunted Beard. My name is Jake. Well, it is finally time to conclude and officially wrap up my entire Saw series. Today, I am going to be doing my official ranking video, ranking all 9 films of the Saw franchise. So if you haven't been following along, I have gone through this entire series and have done a review for each individual film, and here we are with the concluding part, ranking all 9 of these. Let's get into this. Real quick, my criteria for ranking these is which one of these would I least want to rewatch from the bottom all the way to the one that I would most want to rewatch at the very top. And like with any list, this is just mine. It is just my opinion. So without further ado, here we go. Let's kick things off with number 9. My least favorite of the Saw franchise is Saw 3. And the main reason for that is that this thing is just simply too long. I watched the director's cut, but I think the director's cut is only a few minutes longer than the theatrical. This thing clocks in at like an hour and 52 minutes or something like that, which is just insane. It is at least 20, if not closer to 30 minutes too long. There is so much in here that is just completely unnecessary filler and just information that we don't need. It is just so overbloated. It gets to the point to where it's just boring at sometimes. And that's the thing with these movies, is that even some of the ones that aren't as good, they at least move along at a fairly quick pace, but not with Saw 3. There are a couple highlights, though. I will give it some credit. And I guess I'll say, too, I don't necessarily hate any of the movies in this entire franchise. But with that being said, there are a few highlights in this one I really quite enjoy, and I think it's actually one of the better scenes in the entire series, is the brain surgery scene with Jigsaw. Pretty fantastic scene. I also really like the torture trap scene where the guy finally confronts the guy who killed his son. And you get the guy strapped in these things and he starts twisting his limbs all around. 2 really solid scenes. Other than that, though, there is just not really hardly anything in here that I care very much for at all. I think the other traps are not really that good or memorable at all. Like I said, so much of this is just filler. And also, too, the character of Amanda is just like this whiny little teenager who is just really kind of annoying to watch. So that is my number 9, Saw 3. Next up at number 8 is Jigsaw, and this one for me is just a total missed opportunity. Where this is now, when this one came out, it was the 8th film in this series, and you had a little bit of a break between Saw 3D and when this came out. And seemingly that would have been a chance for the writers to kind of, gather together and try to inject some new life into this thing, but instead they just give us the same old, and it's just a total disappointment and really kind of a complete waste of time. You got just some stuff here that is just kind of laughably bad, and I will give it some credit because at least to a degree it's entertaining. Some of the dialogue is pretty terrible. You've got the thing where one of the coroner autopsy, the girl has like the massive warehouse of Jigsaw memorabilia, which is just hilariously ridiculous. And then what it does is you get sort of the big, I guess, twist, if you can call it that, where, of course, they bring back Jigsaw, and they play it off as if it's this big surprise, but it just totally falls flat. And then the twist is that, oh, guess what? We jacked with the timeline again, and none of this stuff is happening side by side. This really happened way before this. And it's just like, again, it's just like, how many times have we done this already in this series? It's just terrible. You've also got just one of the most insanely absurd scenes in this entire series that again, it is kind of laughably bad when somehow the guy who's in a coma ends up in Jigsaw's casket. I mean, it's just wild, man. Anyways, the shining spot for this one, if I had to pick one out, is I like when the detective at the very end gets killed and his head gets split open in a bunch of different pieces. That's kind of cool. I will say, really kind of the only reason why this one edges out Saw 3 is just because it's shorter by probably close to half an hour. So that's really about it. So that Jigsaw sits at number 8 for me. Coming in at number 7 is Saw 5. And this one here, I like the opening scene. I like the opening kill where the guy is kind of doing a bit of a callback to the Edgar Allan Poe hitting the pendulum thing. It's a pretty gnarly, memorable kill, one of the better ones, I think, in this series. And this one, too, I like in a way that they get back to the concept of sort of the escape room where you got these 5 strangers in a room and they're trying to kind of in a way sort of work together, right? They got to figure out why they're there and what the secret is and how to navigate and get out of the room. So I kind of like that aspect as well. This one, though, I am not a fan of Hoffman. I don't really like his performance. I do not think it's all that good. I don't really like his character either. When you've got such I think, a legitimately solid, maybe even borderline great character like Jigsaw with a really solid performance from Tobin Bell, and this is the next guy. I mean, it's such a drastic drop in quality. It's just a bummer. This one too also suffers from the same issues as a lot of these, in that so much of what we're given is just flashbacks, and it's just kind of this unnecessary filler. It's given us information that we don't really need to know. And it's just kind of a bummer because, unfortunately, with the way that they started off this series, when you kill your main guy, when you kill Jigsaw in the 3rd film, the only way to bring him back, which, I mean, he's obviously your main highlight to this entire thing, the only way to bring him back is through flashbacks. And so they have to kind of come up with a way to give us what we want, but at the same time, it's giving us information that we don't need. And so there's just a handful of that in this movie. And also, too, with the ending on this one, I think it's pretty predictable and pretty unsatisfying and just overall not really that memorable at all. This one, I had a bit of a difficult time even trying to remember some of the specifics about it. And so a lot of this is just kind of unmemorable. So that sits at number 7, Saw 5. All right, coming in at number 6, and I will say if I was making a tier list here, we would be jumping up a tier here. So number 6 for me is, and maybe this is crazy, I would imagine I probably have this one higher than most people, but number 6 for me is Saw 3D, the final chapter. And listen, this is not a movie I would call good by any means, but I do find it entertaining in kind of a so bad it's good kind of a way. I'm not really a fan of the 3D gimmick at all, but I think if you are going to use it, this is exactly the type of movie that it should be used for. And so there's just that aspect of that just cheesy, ridiculous, over-the-top 3D aspect at this thing that is just entertaining for me. The Jill Tuck dream sequence when she gets completely ripped apart by whatever that thing was, I can't even remember, but it's just one of those things that it's like, yeah, we're just building scenes just for the sake of the 3D gimmick at this point. Also, too, I will say this one has, I think, a legitimately solid kill scene with the dude from Linkin Park, I think, rest in peace. But I think it's a pretty great kill. He's the white nationalist guy, right, stuck to his car, and the whole sort of almost Rube Goldberg effect chain reaction that it sets off is a pretty great and entertaining little scene. So I get a kick out of that one every time I get to watch it. Other than that, though, this is in a way a movie of kind of two halves for me. There's one half, the half with Sean Patrick Flanery, that I actually kind of enjoy and think is fairly decent. And I think he's one of the better characters in this series, at least in terms of a Saw character. He's one of the more kind of developed ones, and so I kind of enjoy that aspect. I like the game that he gets put through, and so that part works for me. The other half of this film is just more Hoffman stuff and just meh. I don't really enjoy it all that much at all. And then this one too has the most atrocious ending for sure in this series, but just maybe even of all time. The ending is awful, and the whole thing with bringing back Carrie Elwes it's atrocious. But Anyways, there is at least enough there to where I can get some entertainment out of this one, and so Saw 3D sits at number 6 for me. Okay, next up for me at number 5 is Saw 4. And Saw 4 has a handful of things going for it that actually have a pretty decent time with it. I really like the opening scene, and that is Jigsaw's autopsy. It's just a killer scene. It's got just some gnarly practical effects. Jigsaw's dead body there, the cutting him open. I really like just kind of the color palette here. It's all muted, and then you just get that pop of blood red. Really solid opening scene that I quite enjoy. This one, too, has some of the most ridiculous editing that I have ever seen, but it kind of works here. I think in a way you can kind of get away with some just crazy, ridiculous stuff in these movies, and the editing here is just madness. And it's kind of cool because I actually learned that they were actually able to do it all in camera just because of the way they built the sets. And so you've got just crazy stuff where, you know, from one storyline to the others, some girl gets like thrown through a glass mirror, and then boom, we're in a completely different location following a completely different set of characters. And so it's just kind of cool. It just kind of works here. This one too, also, we get good old Detective Mean Mug, who I quite enjoy in a bit of a so bad it's good kind of way. Just some of his dialogue is just truly atrocious but laughably bad, and so I find it entertaining. And then also, too, I actually kind of enjoy some of the flashbacks here, and I think in a way I can kind of make some of the same complaints that it's just kind of giving us more information that we don't need, but at least the flashbacks here are at least done well. And in other words, it's centered a lot around Jigsaw and Jill's relationship, and it kind of humanizes Jigsaw, and I kind of like that because you get more Tobin Bell, and it kind of fleshes out his character, and again, he's why we're watching. He's the one we care the most about. And so I actually kind of get something out of the flashbacks with this one and think they're actually pretty good. And again, I just like watching Tobin Bell in this character. I also really like the kill of the big fat dude in the hotel room. Pretty gnarly one. And then I really like, shout out to Donnie Wahlberg, seeing his head explode by them big old 2 ice blocks in the end is always kind of fun. So that is number 5 for me, Saw 4. Coming in at number 4 is Spiral, and this was the only film out of this entire series that I hadn't seen before, so my review for this one was from my first time watching it. And for the most part, I have a pretty decent time with this. I like Chris Rock. He's a little bit mixed, but I think overall I enjoy his performance pretty well. He definitely leans into the comedy, and I like that there's a couple scenes where you can tell they just kind of let him loose to just kind of riff and roll with things. And so I get a kick out of that. I like, though, that they got kind of back to the basics of what worked about the better Saw movies, in that they didn't just make this crazy story that's all centered around the traps and the kills as the selling point. They really just tried to make a compelling detective murder mystery story and use the kills and the traps to enhance that story. And I like that for the most part. And I thought they gave the killer in this a pretty solid and understandable motivation. And so you can kind of get behind him to a degree, and it just kind of makes things not so black and white. And so you can understand where he's coming from. He's going after all these dirty and corrupt cops. And so I enjoyed that as well. I enjoy that it's just kind of focused more on the mystery aspect of who is this new copycat killer. And so overall, it's not great, but I have a decent enough time with this one. I enjoyed myself. Also, got to give a shout out to Samuel L. Jackson. I liked seeing him in this as well. So that is my number 4, Spiral. All right, here we go, top 3 time. And again, if I was making a tier list, we would be jumping up a tier here. These top 3 are on a tier above the rest. Coming in at number 3 is Saw 6. And this is just kind of a crazy one. This is sort of an unexpected kind of shining moment in this series where you're 6 deep and you kind of get one that's like, man, that was actually pretty good. And so I have quite a bit of fun with Saw 6. The main thing for me is I really like the whole kind of going after the health insurance companies aspect of this. I just think it makes it more interesting and just kind of adds a bit of a layer of complexity there. I really like the scene between Jigsaw and the health insurance guy where you kind of get a nice little monologue to a degree where Jigsaw just kind of goes off, and just a really solid scene there. And then I like the whole game that the health insurance guy has to play. I find it interesting and compelling, and it just kind of makes sort of the moral ambiguity of it. It just makes it more compelling. It's certainly a better sort of game. I think maybe even the best game out of this entire series. And so it makes it interesting because he's having to choose who to kill and who lives, and they're all people he knows. I really like the Ferris wheel. No, not the Ferris wheel. The what do you call it? The merry-go-round thing, where he's got to pick which one of his employees lives and dies, and they're all just letting him have it and cussing him out and stuff. I kind of just get a kick out of it, and so have a pretty solid time with Saw 6. And also too, I really like the ending. I think it's a pretty effective little twist and kind of an unexpected moment. And then we get a gnarly kill with the guy when he gets injected with the acid and he just kind of melts apart and everything. And so there's quite a bit here to enjoy in Saw 6. I have a good time with it. It is just kind of that unexpected sort of shining moment in this series. Not what you would expect 6 movies deep, but there it is. And so have a good time with Saw 6. It sits at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is Saw 2. And this one is a pretty solid sequel to the original. I really like Donnie Wahlberg here. The main thing where this shines for me is that because of how the original film is set up, you don't really get to see much of your villain. And this is where we really get to sit down, so to speak, with Jigsaw and really kind of get to see Tobin Bell at work here. And you really just get some good kind of juicy moments with Jigsaw as he's sitting down, dying, and he's like the weakest, most frail guy in the room, surrounded by all these, policemen and SWAT team guys. But he is the commanding presence. He is the scariest, most terrifying person in the room. And Tobin Bell just, sells the crap out of that performance. So I just really love that. And then I also like, too, just the whole escape room thing. I think that it's just really solid. I like how it all plays out. I like that there is that kind of emotional investment with Donnie Wahlberg's son being in the room. I like what they do with Amanda in this, kind of bringing her back and not entirely sure, and then you kind of find out who she is towards the end. Just really solid. Of course, the needle pit scene is just, oh man, that scene is absolutely brutal, but certainly memorable. And so that whole side, really both of these stories back and forth really work for me. I find them both interesting and compelling and tense, and so just all around a really solid time. And I really like the ending as well. And this one gets credit because this is the first time they jack with the timeline, and it works, and it's surprising, and it's effective, and you don't expect it. And so I think Saw 2 is a really solid sequel to the original. But of course, number 1, it's got to be the original Saw. And this thing is pretty great. I still think it is now almost 20 years old now, which is crazy, but man, still holds up really well. It's still really effective. And just kudos to James Wan and Lee Winnell. Just that concept, that idea of just dropping you in this room with these two strangers in this crazy, nasty looking bathroom, and you're just like, what in the world is going on? I mean, it's such a great idea, and they just pull it off really effectively. And I just love the element of mystery that is in this thing. And it's amazing watching this as I watch it again, obviously doing this series. I was kind of just surprised how tame this one is in terms of the blood and gore compared to the others. But this one gets credit for just, it's the origin, it's the concept, it's the whole idea. And so it's amazing too, just what they were able to do with such a low budget. And this one too just really has, I think, the most kind of, it has just a visual quality to it that I think sets itself apart from the other ones in just terms that, like, the low budget kind of gritty, grainy, some of it's out of focus, some of the lighting's bad, but it just works and it really kind of complements the whole visual feel of this film as well. There's some really solid standout scenes as well. One of the scenes where Lee Winnell is in his apartment and thinks somebody's in there and everything's dark, and then he hits the flash on his camera, and of course the pig is in his closet and jumps out at him. I like the little bit of a callback there to Hitchcock's Rear Window. There's also a scene that's really disturbing with Cary Elwes' wife and his daughter. They're sitting there, and the dude, Zeke's got a gun pointed at him, and they're just sitting there screaming and crying. It's just, man, really memorable and just disturbing. I'm not a big fan of that scene, as effective as it is, but it is really effective. And then, of course, the ending is just, man, it's really solid. It still gets me even to this day. There's just something about the combination of when that music kicks in and you see Lee Winnell's face, just eyes wide, jaws drop, as he sees out of the corner of his eyes, there's Jigsaw in the middle of the room getting up off the floor. Man, it's just, oh, it's killer. It's just fantastic. It's a great ending. And so, yeah, it's just the cherry on top to this movie that I think is a classic at this point, and I think it's just really great. So that sits at number 1 on my list. I can't imagine anything's going to dethrone it, but we'll see what happens. As of right now, they've announced they're doing another one, so we'll have to wait till next year to see what happens. But there we go. Thank you so much for watching. Hit me up down in the comments, though. I would love to see what your guys' lists are. Please let me know down below. Again, thank you so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button if you like content like this. That is what I do on The Haunted Beard. It is all horror and thriller movie content coming at you. And that's all I got for you. I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.